And a pleasant good evening, everyone. And welcome to my exciting podcast here. And today we have Terri, Michal, and Richard Franklin from the Birmingham Chapter of the American Federation of Teachers here. Richard, Terri, thank you so much for joining us today. So we have a couple of things that we wanted to unpack here, but first, I just want to, give you two an opportunity to tell the audience who you are.
Okay.
Either one of you can start, but I like to say ladies first. So,
Yeah, I'm gonna say late, Terri.
And I say bosses first, but okay. Thank you, Keith, and everyone for having this tonight. I apologize for my problems, my technical problems, but yeah, I'm Terri Michal. I am a representative of Birmingham AFT, also the founder of SOS Support Our Students. I've been doing that grassroots organizing since 2012. And recently served 4 years as an elected Birmingham City School Board member.
Okay, and Richard.
All right, hold up. Let's see what did my Zoom just do? Okay, my name is Richard Franklin, president of Birmingham AFT, a lifelong resident of Birmingham. Keith, thank you for having this show, letting us get the information out, and just having a dialogue about some of the some of the things. If we didn't have these platforms, we couldn't have these conversations. Me and Terri have known each other about what, Terri? This has been about 8 years now, Terri. Has it been that long? Or is it longer?
Nope, I think you're right. 8 years.
Yep. Yeah, and we started out about we first met actually on a panel about the subject we're going to talk about today, Keith. So we really want to talk about it.
Okay, so we're gonna get into the meat and potatoes of the matter. So the two things we want to be discussing is your thoughts and expertise on the privatization of public schools and debunking the myths regarding charter schools, because there's a lot of misinformation that is going around, particularly in the city of Birmingham and Jefferson County surrounding charter schools. So I invited you, Terri, and you, Richard, to set the record straight. So so we're going to start with clearing the air about charter schools first, and then we're going to talk about the privatization of public schools. So my first question would, because I know that the two of you have been, you guys are a strong advocate of public schools. So what are some of the myths that's associated with, having a charter school?
But do you mind, Richard, if I jump in?
Go ahead.
Okay, I think the most important thing for people to understand is that charter schools are only as good as the law and as good as those who are overseeing them are. And so here in Alabama, we all know, okay, that a majority of the students across this country that are in charter schools are Black and brown students and high poverty students. So when we look at Alabama and we look at our law, and more importantly, we look at the attitudes of our lawmakers towards our Black and brown students and towards our high poverty students, that's where we really need to decide about charter schools in Alabama. It doesn't matter if another state has a good charter school. It doesn't matter about what's happening anywhere else in this country. What matters is what's happening in Alabama and what our law says. So if anyone comes at you and says, well, my niece's cousins, whatever in California went to this school and it was amazing. Well, yay, wonderful for them. But we're in Alabama and we only know or do what our charter school law says. And I think the fact that we have so few schools after all this time, the law was passed in 2015, and we've already had the drama that we have had around the schools that we have and are yet trying to come freedom. Then I would say that we have grave concerns over the quality of the charter schools that we will have here in Alabama. Richard, do you have anything to add to that? I know that was a mouthful. I had to get it off my chest.
So I was gonna say a couple of things when I think about myths. Charter schools do not perform academically as a whole better than traditional public schools. All the you can Google that and look up research. As Terri spoke, most of the time when you hear people talk that are charter school proponents, they don't talk about an entire district. They talk about a particular school. There's nowhere in this country where, and you got to understand, I'm gonna start naming some places. Detroit, they have charter schools. Their schools have been some of the worst in the country. Washington D.C., Michelle Reed when she was there, some of the worst schools. If you remember years ago, the Atlanta cheating scandal, a lot of that's when they brought those charter schools in. You know, I could Memphis, Tennessee. If you look at, we have these different companies coming here now from different states. What I want us to remember is that our children and even us, me and Terri and AFT, and I can go back and talk about the beginning of what charter schools were supposed to be in the beginning, and they've turned it into a profitable, like a business model. But you don't have a district around this anywhere in this country. The closest one that they tried to turn the whole district into charter schools was New Orleans. And you'll hear them say, well, New Orleans schools are doing better than what it was doing before. That's not what we asking. They make all these promises. I've traveled to Detroit. They'll promise, they promise things like, if your child comes to a charter school, we'll give you a laptop, we'll give you an iPad. They do things like that, make all these promises. But at the end of the day, the big thing that people need to know is that if you turn every Birmingham, let's take Birmingham, every Birmingham school into a charter school, that means each school has to have its own board. But what you will find out, it sounds good in theory, but most of these boards are not going to be made up anywhere of people. They may put one person from the community, but the rest of them will be business people outside or some national chain that runs it, and they control the money. And we've had situations in Philadelphia. If you just look at years ago, they'll say things like the money follows the child. That's a lie. They did the 40-day count in Philadelphia, sent all the children back to the regular public school, and they didn't have money to pay the teachers that semester. So I think it was Oprah Winfrey or somebody, wasn't it, Terri, that did a show and they ended up paying the teachers that. I mean, we're getting into a very dangerous, profitable situation. It's like vultures coming. You're gonna see people who don't have children, haven't had children in public schools for years, talk about public schools like a dog, and talk about charter schools as if they're the answer for Black and brown children. I've traveled this country. There's just like we have certain schools that are doing good. In our traditional public schools, the same thing with the charter schools. They will not solve any of the issues that we're having right now. And me and Terri, you'll hear us talk about one of the issues I think we're faced with is educating the whole child. It's not just what goes on in school. There's also some things going on within our communities in urban settings that we have to talk about. And that's just a little bit. I know that was a lot for people to unpack, but I wanted to touch on some of the myths because you hear Birmingham, I'm gonna use Birmingham, they say, hey, we're failing so much. All the schools are failing. That's not true. That's just rhetoric that they use.
Yeah, I mean, whatever myths that you have, let it be known.
Okay, so I think, Richard, if I can, one myth that is very pertinent because it's being perpetuated right here in Birmingham is that conversion charter schools, that local school. Okay, so according to the law, if a local school board wants to be an authorizer, then they have to notify the commission, the charter school commission they want to be. Birmingham has done that. So Birmingham is a charter school authorizer. And so the only way we can have conversion charter schools in Birmingham is if Birmingham City Schools votes to do it. The commission cannot make us do it. Only if the school board votes. And so one of the arguments that have been made since 2015 or 16 by the school board, by members of, I always try to be accurate, certain members of the school board back in 2015 and 16, their argument was that conversion charter schools are better than startups because a conversion charter school, the local Board of Education has more control over them. And I just really want the proper information about that to be out there because I have no doubt in my mind that this conversation is coming up very, very, very soon. So I want the community to understand what that means. A conversion charter school acts and behaves exactly like a startup charter school. The difference is that conversion charter school will come into our own building. Let's just suppose they do. Suppose they turn Avondale into a conversion charter school. What that means is that they will announce that they'll have to vote on it, and then it'll start in the next school year. So potentially they could say, starting in the 22-23 school year, Avondale is now a conversion charter school. What that means is that the charter school folks will get to use the building and they will get everything that's inside the building, including the students. If the students decide to stay, the parents will have that option, they'll be notified. And if they want their child to be in a charter school, they will stay there. So that conversion charter school that would be hypothetically happening in Avondale will have its own board, okay? And according to the law, they will have to hire a charter management organization, which is basically like Phalen Charter Schools. Phalen, P-H-A-L-E-N, can be a charter management organization, or they can have a startup charter school. So they can do both. So what these national organizations like Phalen are deciding to do is to not hold the charter application for a conversion. They want local people to hold that, and then they'll just come in as a management organization and deal with all the money. What a deal, right? So they have use of the building, they have everything inside of it, they have the children if they choose to stay. All the staff will revert back to a pool of Birmingham City School students and will have to reapply for their jobs. So they'll have those additional things that will help them open sooner and cheaper. And that's why folks like Phalen Charter, who is managing a conversion charter school in Montgomery on behalf of the Montgomery Ed Foundation, that's why they choose to do that rather than come in like what Freedom Prep is trying to do, come in from Memphis and have a startup charter school. There's a whole lot that goes into that, including money. So it's cheaper to do a conversion. They get the exact same benefits. But the only difference when they talk about a local school board having more control, this is what they mean. With a startup charter school, if Birmingham wanted one and voted yes on an application, and now boom, let's say Freedom Prep got their startup charter school, then what would happen is that Birmingham City Schools would oversee what's going on in that startup, but they can't do anything about anything. After usually around 3 years, they will, give some input into the charter school. and say, this is your problem area, this is what you need to fix, we're concerned about this, blah, 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 blah. And then at 5 years, if things are not going well, then Birmingham City Schools could end that contract. Okay, now this is where the only difference comes in with a conversion charter school. That process is much quicker. So if after a year, they don't like the way that the conversion is going, then they would notify them, you need to do this, this, or this, give them time to accommodate and change. So that is the only thing, is that they could have input sooner than the 5-year mark. And that's what people are calling, more control. I don't call that control. I call that disruption, because after a year, can you imagine the disruption to take a startup and say, whoops, nah, you guys aren't doing it. We're kicking you out. Hey, anybody else want this? And either it will be a startup under another management organization, or it will revert back to a public school. That's insane. Who's going to do that after a year? So they're going to give them time. And so basically, if they're truly concerned about the students, that both processes will in the end be exactly the same. And if you have a school board that are favorable to charter schools, they're going to keep giving them another chance, another chance, and another chance, because the last thing I'm going to say, I know it's a lot, because in actuality, our charter school law does not say at any time you absolutely have to close a charter school. A failing charter school can continue on and on and on. And that's important for people to understand.
So that's a different concept. Like if, you have a failing charter school versus a failing, public school, that kind of works a little different per se. Now,
it can, but it doesn't have to.
So what is the accountability and transparency like, at a charter school?
Richard, do you want this? I've talked a lot.
When you look around the country as a whole with the concept, and I guess this goes into the original idea of charter school started with AFT President Albert Shanker in 1988. He envisioned charter schools would be think pads, learning pads. He felt that the federal government was putting so much on traditional public schools. The example he would always give was that if for science class, if the teacher wanted to go outside and do science projects every day, it wasn't restricted to whatever they were supposed to be on that day. I wanted to give them more freedom. What you have seen and what you're seeing going on when it comes to accountability, once they create their board and they create their that national, I call it the national management chains that go on, there's really no accountability. I was listening when Terri was talking. Can you imagine, as much as we talk about Birmingham City Schools right now, when people get upset, something's wrong, they at least call somebody. You can elect a new school board. And I'm saying elect a new school board or board because that board that we're talking about at that charter school is not elected by anybody. That board is usually business people. They set the salaries. If they want to get paid, they get paid. I mean, it's no accountability. We have a situation going on. What's the school in Montgomery, Terri?
The LEAP.
Yeah,
LEAP
I mean, they
Academy?
had serious problems.
Many. They've been sued many times.
Yeah, I mean, and they were only been in existence how long? What has it been? It hadn't been 2-3
2
years.
full years. I think they're
Yeah.
they're in their third, because they've had a different principal every year.
Yeah.
And this is their third year, third principal.
Right. So, and I'll go ahead and say this, we also know the 2 charter schools that we do have in Birmingham right now. And I'm gonna talk about this, the accountability piece. One charter school, when it started, it was supposed to be Star Academy. Remember, Keith? Everybody in the community that's watching, Star Academy. That's what it was supposed to be. And then I told at the time, Pastor Beavers, I said, hey, you know, you got your congregation here, and I understand y'all concerned. I said, but it's gonna be who's ever on that board of that charter school. But Terri was in the hall, she heard the conversation. And to make a long story short, you don't have Star Academy. What you have is Legacy Prep. They sued each other, went back and forth, and you have Legacy Prep. They've had some situations occur over there. When you hear me say this, I know the proponents of charter schools, they're going to be for charter schools regardless. What we're saying is stop lying to the community that if you bring these things in, if you do a conversion charter school, all of a sudden everything is going to change. No. In most of the situations, because they can't point to a district in this country that's performing academically, you've seen a huge transformation. And if Keith and the listening audience, I really want y'all to think about something. They talk about accountability. In a lot of these situations, they pick the students that they want. That's not in Birmingham. They do lotteries, different stuff. And they schools still, when you look at national research, do not perform academically better than that traditional public school that has to meet the child where they are. Traditional public schools don't get to pick the children, the best and the brightest, and say, hey, you know, you go. Keith, we went to Parker. They put us all together. And our teachers had to teach us and find different ways to get us to learn. But I mean, it's to me, it's just a way for people to make money, and it's legal. That's why they pass these laws. I try not to talk Republican and Democrat. For people that are consider themselves Democrat and Black in this state, when these laws were passed, the same people that you're cheering for, all of a sudden, you're hearing them at the time go against President Obama, the first Black president, just because he was Black. Those same people, when you walked in the room with them, just because you were Black, they would talk about Black and brown, and we got to help them. But when you got up and you say, hey, I live in these communities, this is what we need, they don't listen to you. You know, we have a bigger problem. When it comes to Birmingham, at some point, we're going backwards to me. I think it was 1963, CBS did a documentary, Who Speaks for Birmingham? And at the time, it was about race. Birmingham was separated on race. At some point in all our urban centers around the country, we are going to have to say, in our situation, who speaks for the real Birmingham? We have a lot of people that are coming in to make money. Like, for example, what's going on in your community, Keith? Y'all didn't ask them to come in. They're just here. As if, and they're going to tell Birmingham and your neighborhood what you need. It's a difference if you ask for it. I've always been that person to say to the community, if you live somewhere and that's what y'all want, even if I disagree with it, that's your community, that's your neighborhood. But in too many of our situations, especially when it comes to our public schools, we've got people who've never taught in the classroom, never worked with children, never volunteered at a school, most of them, never done anything in the communities that they talk about. And they just all of a sudden tell us what we need. And these concepts don't have any research with it to show that it's going to work. And so we already know most of the things what they do because we look at research. If we can tell traditional public schools when they bring things that come up, Keith, in the listening audience that is not going to work, then we can look at a charter school model and say, hey, it's not going to work. They use the word innovation, Keith. They always talk about innovation. The part they don't tell people, we don't need innovation for charter schools. They don't make innovation. The Woodline Innovation Network was passed by Dr. Bice at the time, he was state superintendent, as an innovation waiver. Any district in the state of Alabama, they want to do an innovation waiver, they can, if that's what they want to do. That is something I've always said. When Terri was on the board, I always encourage local districts, if they could, to think outside the box to do it. Just open up a school, stands a charter school. That's not innovation. They're just changing the name of what the school is and determining those people on that board how much money they're gonna make.
And so, you know, Richard, that's one area that we're going to have to be very, very careful with. One thing, you know, that we have talked about before is that the problem is that these folks come in, the ones that want to privatize public education, because basically that's what all of this is
Right.
coming down to, okay? And maybe they're not doing it for the privatization part. Maybe they actually believe, what they are saying. But the thing is that people with the best hearts, okay, can come in and say, I believe that these charter schools are the way to go, and here's why. They may mean that. And in actuality, if those same things were done for public education with public education, then those could have been benefits that turned these things around. So the things sound right. And that's the important part to understand. We can't just go on the surface of what we're hearing these folks say when they come visit our communities and they talk, because you can do it the right and wrong way. And all too many times they're talking the right way, but it gets implemented the wrong way. And that's really what we have got to be careful about. And that's why we need to ask so many questions. The waiver, the innovation waiver that created the Woodlawn Initiative, I don't think I'm saying anything too controversial, because Richard and I have said this before, is that they implemented this waiver, but they didn't really, nothing was followed, and everybody just anguished and let these Woodlawn Initiative schools flounder, except for one that they held up to be the triumph and to show that it works. But that's just because that's the one they put everybody through. They did the, what am I trying to say, Richard? They gave the tours. How many times, Richard, were we at that school? And I don't see a reason to mention its name, Richard. If you want to, you can. It doesn't matter. But still, we would see droves of white people coming through, headed up by who? Should we say it, Richard?
Go say it.
Dr.
You
Bice.
say it. Dr. Bice.
They would take their tours. We saw them over and over again coming through to see how great and wonderful the school is. But at the same time, Putnam was getting next to no help. I said this as a school board member when it came time to talk to the Woodlawn Foundation about that very waiver. And so it was implemented differently. It was not implemented in a way, I believe, my opinion, that they wanted all of these schools to be successful. And so that's why I'm saying that, we can't just go on how things sound. The innovation waiver sounded good, but yet it didn't happen in any way, shape, or form. So now Dr. Sullivan talks about more innovation waivers, about Birmingham City Schools being innovative. And that's great and wonderful. And I want to believe that he has the best intentions in mind and that it will be done the correct way. But with these waivers, they can be done in a way that will still put things like Phelan Charter School or Freedom Prep behind it, and so that they will still manage all the curriculum and potentially all the money. So we could end up with the same situation of a conversion charter school without ever using the word conversion charter school. The outcome with innovation waivers can be exactly the same as what I'm trying to say.
And ladies and gentlemen,
Richard, did I say that right?
You said it right.
ladies and
Keith will
gentlemen,
decipher. He'll ask us questions.
we are, ladies and gentlemen, we are here. The podcast is called Talk Show Presents. This is actually our first episode of the 5th season. We have been sporadically doing podcasts, now and then, but now we are back to, for this particular segment, we'll be doing monthly presentations. And so we are talking with Terri, Michal, and Richard Franklin from the Birmingham Chapter of the American Federation of Teachers. And we are having a conversation about charter schools. What you're not being told. What you're being told, what the misinformation is, what is the truth about charter schools? So that's what we're talking about today. And then in the second part of our segment, of course, we'll have a conversation about what's the story behind the privatization of public schools. So I want to put this out there because Freedom Prep had filed an application at first with Birmingham City Schools to come to the Titusville community. And that application was rejected by the school board for whatever reason. Now they have appealed to the State Charter School Commission. And then a couple of weeks ago, their community met with Freedom Prep for a hearing. So they had a community meeting there. And what they did when they filed this application, they said that the community, was behind Freedom Prep and they supported the charter school being in Titusville. And the first question I asked was, well, who did you talk to? That was the first question that came out. Who did you talk to? And they said, well, we talked to Our Lady of Fatima Church because their old school building is what they want to use. And then we talked to the Titusville Development Corporation. I stopped them right there and said, listen, Titusville Development Corporation, the people that work there do not live in the community. And 95% of the people that attend that church they don't live in Titusville. So again, I ask you, who did you talk to? I mean, these folks have lied from the beginning. They lied on their application and said that the community supported they didn't even talk to us. And so when we was at that meeting, I mean, we just let them, have it. You're putting something here that you have even, discussed with us. And then you lied to Birmingham City Schools, you lying to the state. And as a matter of fact, there was a rumor that they have withdrawn their application. That's not true neither. So what I'm saying is to those who are listening, if you're putting information out there that people have a listening ear to, make sure it's factual, make sure it's truthful. Because there's a lot of dishonest people out there that are ready to take advantage of you. And that's what's happening, in this case. And I have to, mention that because Freedom Prep has been lying to us from day one. And they are continuing to lie. And we as a community is not going to stand for it.
Hey Keith, let me connect something that you said to go deeper with Fatima. And I think I was telling you this story. When Demetrius Newton, our state representative at the time, he passed away, his seat became open and Anthony Johnson became the representative for a little while. And I remember him asking me to come to a meeting at the church at Fatima. And they were, that's right after Terri, I want y'all to listen. They had passed the State Accountability Act, where if kids were in a failing school, that public money could go to that private school. Well, what we found out is that Fatima, which was a black in our community, was not benefiting from it. It actually hurt them, and they told us their school was shut down, and they had a group of people. They were saying they never called a name, but they were saying was pushing them to start their own charter school. So I'm saying all that to say, these things are done by design. They will destroy something or take something away and act like they're giving us something. And in this situation, Keith, you live over there, and I will say, I've had family members and friends. I attended Center Street and Fatima, even though they were a private school at the time, and Center Street is Holy Family's in there now, but at that time, Center Street was one of the top middle schools in the state, and middle school, and Fatima was one of the top private schools, and these were both African American schools. And we as a community, well, we have to start understanding that people are exploiting us, they're depriving us, and then they offer us. And the part that I have to support you, Keith, and the Titusville community, if you didn't ask for it, why are they there? Who brought them here? what makes them think they have the right to just come in? They wouldn't go into Mountain Brook, they wouldn't go into Hoover, and I'm not just talking about education. This is why the real Birmingham, I was saying, have to stand up for what's right. It's our city. These are our communities. How do we just let people come in and use our
Terri raised
kids
her
and our
hand
community
like
like
she got
guinea
the
pigs?
answer to that. She
Terry,
got the
got the
answer
answer
to
to
that.
that?
But
I got
after
the
that, we
answer
do
to
have a
that.
question that's on the floor
Okay.
for either you
Okay,
or
can we
Richard
finish
or
this
Terri.
thread first before we
Yes.
go over there? Okay,
Yes.
because this is really important. And so, here's the thing. This is what year? 2022. Okay, this is what we have to understand is that these folks are very patient. They plan these things out for years. So what I want people to hear is that New Schools for Alabama in 2019 wrote an application for a charter school program grant. It's called a CSP grant through the federal government. I think it was around 30 pages, if not more. These kind of grants you don't just boom do. So let's just say they probably started discussing it in 2018. So Keith, as early as 2018, New Schools for Alabama was talking to folks about at Freedom Prep about starting a charter school in Birmingham, Alabama. And that is in their grant that they wrote and gave to the federal government in 2019. They mentioned 3 or 4 charter schools that they are, I don't know what the words, that they're in good grace with, that they like, that they work together with, and that if they won that grant, and that's New Schools for Alabama, is a $25 million grant, that if they won that grant, that would help them get charter schools, and one was mentioned, Freedom Prep, into the Birmingham area. So people need to understand that this didn't just all of a sudden happen. For years, people have been behind closed doors, and predominantly white people behind closed doors talking about how they are going to monetize Birmingham City Schools. And that's a nice way to say it. What I really want to say is that they are finding ways to make money off of Black and brown bodies, because 96% of Birmingham City Schools are Black and brown students. So we have a group of folks that are predominantly white in the charter school industry that have spent years talking about how they're going to make money off of Birmingham City School students. And I would say, and I think Richard would back me up to say, we can say that goes back to 2011-12 under the takeover, but that's a whole nother story.
Yeah.
I did want to though put out there the application from New Schools for Alabama that we can use to prove that they've spent years doing exactly what they're doing, planning to do exactly what they're doing.
Okay, so Jake Bates wants to know how does the charter school system is impacting educators in the public school system?
I guess we'll say the long run or right now, if that person can answer. Are they saying now or just the long run, like what we see going on?
I would say the short term and hold on for just a second.
Oh, actually, I see what I saw that question.
Okay, well let's let Jade expound on that.
I'm so sorry. Can you rephrase?
Okay, I was reading your question in the chat. Can you expound on that?
Oh, sure. So my question is, I'm not an educator. So I feel like teachers are under a lot of pressure for many reasons. And basically my question is just like, I want to get involved and some of the people I know and I think are really good people that I respect, I feel like because of those very real pressures, they are being pressured to leave public schools and work for charter schools. So what would you say? I know that's like a really layered question, but yeah, if y'all want to speak on, do you think that like long term, maybe there are some short term benefits to teachers, but maybe you want to speak on like long term, do you think that's good that teachers are leaving possibly for a charter school?
I'm thinking of, I'm trying to think locally because we have three charter schools, Terry, that we have here locally in our
Well,
area.
two so far. Richard, I don't believe the law passed. I think they tried last year to pass a law saying if teachers left the traditional public school system, and then that charter school closed or for whatever reason they left and came back to the traditional system, that they retain their tenure. But I don't think that law passed.
It didn't pass. Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, that's one thing, is that teachers have to worry about, what does this do to my career if I leave and go try this? Plus, the charter schools don't have to honor the salary schedule that the state makes that every traditional public school system has to. So just from the teacher's point of view, those are things they have to think about.
And then also just in general, one of the things that we have seen when we're saying this as collectively AFT nationally over time, one of the things they push, why they push a teacher to go into a charter school, they try to take away, they thought originally it would hurt unions, but what it did is hurt that individual teacher, because what you've seen is that unions, they teach, we know how to organize. And if people are getting done wrong, eventually they're going to reach out to us and say something. So they're trying to take away their rights. Also, one of the things that we haven't seen it happen here yet, but it could potentially happen in Birmingham. One of the things that's dangerous about this is that we saw what happened in Philadelphia. When I don't know if you heard in the beginning, they had the 40-day count. They had a charter school. They had the teachers. They had everything. And then once that 40-day count was over, they sent the children back to traditional public school, closed that charter school. So those teachers at the charter school, they're gone, they're without a job. And then the traditional public school teachers, that money stayed with that charter school. Because once that money goes there, they do whatever with that money. And those are in a lot of the states, even in our state, that's the loophole in the law. You know, Terri was telling you the time frame, but during that time, if they're doing something wrong, it can't be done until it touches those time frames. And then the state or nobody has any say so. So then those traditional public school teachers work that entire semester in Philadelphia with no pay. So in both of those situations, the kids and the teachers in that charter school and the traditional schools were hurt in that situation. We've gotten calls from some of the charter schools we have here, some of the things that are going on. I just think personally, some of the things I've seen, I think if you're an educator, you do have some rights. You have at least a process. Even though we don't have a contract here, you have certain processes that they have to follow. When you get to these charter schools, it's each charter authorizer and that board what they deem, whether they want to let unions in. It goes through a whole process to where you have processes to make sure you're covered. Now we do have, I will say, I just say Magic City Academy. They did ask us to come in because we had a great relationship with those of you that with Magic City Academy. The principal and a lot of the staff and people worked in the school system. So they had a good relationship with us. But in a lot of these situations, that's not what they're doing. Their goal is they're going to say, sometimes they blame the teachers in the public school setting as the issue. And then they'll blame the union as the issue. And then they'll say, hey, we started this charter school and bring in brand new teachers. But when you look at it, a lot of times the pay is less. They're not qualified, highly qualified. That's the other issue. If you look at what's going on, the suburban schools around the country, one thing that they're doing is they're trying to make sure they have as many highly qualified individuals in classroom with students. In our settings, in the charter school settings, we're getting so lackadaisical that people can just come off the street, be a warm body, and then we wonder why reading and math, and we're having so many issues because we open up, I call it Pandora's box. Terry's heard me say that. So that's why I also think educators are just leaving. Like, we have a national teacher shortage that was going on before. And you got to understand, this is new to Alabama, these charter schools, but charter schools have been around, and I said full effect, probably 20, 25 years. And if you look at some of the states where they're coming from, look at what's going on with the teachers. And so I hope that answers, it was a lot, but I hope that answers the question.
Alice Speak is she's on the chat, and she want you or
Oh, somebody said something about the IEP and
yeah,
with that,
IEP
with special
and
needs.
discrimination in charter schools, and
Yes. Now,
also
Right.
do you know anything about an education authority board in the city of Birmingham?
Okay, can I talk about the IEP situation?
go ahead.
By all means.
So I'm not going to mention a particular school, but there is a charter school here that does have at least one parent willing to talk to the media about how their special needs student was basically counseled out and sent back to their traditional public school in Birmingham City School system. So I have given that story to different media sources with the parent's name and the parent's phone number. They are willing to do an interview to discuss about how their child that had an IEP was basically counseled out and sent back, and no one will pick up that story. I have a teacher that was in a traditional Birmingham City school and then went to one of the charter schools as a special needs teacher and was so frustrated after 1 year about everything they saw, they left. This same person, this teacher, has given their name and phone number and is willing to do interviews. I have passed that on to the media, several sources, and they still will not cover it. So what I can say is, based on the stories of these folks, that we do have charter schools locally that are counseling out students with IEPs. What many parents don't understand, and to no fault of their own, some of the most amazing advocates are those that are advocating on behalf of special needs students, because they have to. They have to learn the law. They have to advocate for their student because it's so complex. So my hat is off to those parents. But at any rate, but the one thing that's complicated and to understand is that these charter schools are under the same laws when it comes to special needs as the traditional public schools. So if they move from a Birmingham City school to a charter school, they should have the same resources. And if anyone in that charter school comes and tells them, oh, see this in IEP, yeah, it's just not possible for it, you'll be happier. And I'm telling you, this is the exact conversations they have. You will be happier if you go either back to the school you came from, or they'll suggest a school or whatever, because they have more resources. Parents don't always realize, or guardians or the adults in these students' lives don't always realize that that's wrong, that's illegal, and they can be sued for doing that.
So is that the case that's going on with the person that you are not mentioning by name? Is that the case what's going on with this particular
They're not
parent?
suing. They're not suing. They're back to a Birmingham City school and they are happy there and they're appreciative and they just want to move forward. But they did want to put the information out there as a parent that I have been through this and I have learned now that this is the way it is. So just as a warning for other parents that may be going through the same thing, I don't know that this parent wants to sue, but they absolutely could.
Another thing that was mentioned about the Education Authority Board in the city of Birmingham. Do you know anything about that?
Richard, is
Oh,
that what's
today.
going on at City Hall
Oh,
or no? Because all of a
is that
sudden,
their
the
board?
second time you said that, Keith, my radar went up and I'm like,
Yeah,
wait
yeah. I
a
was gonna
minute.
ask, is that their board that the city hall or they have over there at the city?
Well, let's see if Alice knows anything about that. Let's
Okay.
Alice, you want to talk about
Yeah.
that?
Well, I don't have much to talk about because I was hoping either one of y'all were familiar with at least the creation of it. They were
Jog our
appointed.
memory. Jog our memory.
Yeah,
So
John
there
got
were
memory. We
three-
probably remember it.
there were 3 people appointed to the board early this year, I believe, or maybe it was soon after the elections. And I thought it was strange because I had never heard of it before. I think the full name of it is like the Education Building Authority or Education Authority Building. It has building somewhere in the name. What I thought was interesting is that one of the library board members moved from the library board to that board, and they were appointed to that board. But I don't have a lot of information about it. And the most that I could figure out is that it's a board that perhaps deliberates on where funding should go, if they should go to what school and how much. But that's really all I know about it, which is why I was asking if y'all were familiar with that.
Let me say this, and I'll be very honest. We live in during some strange times, especially when it comes to funding from the city of Birmingham to Birmingham City Schools, libraries in the city. I can remember, I can't remember what the board was called, but I remember when Dr. Bice was on some type of board. I do know we've asked that the city council, the mayor, meet with the school board. It's just Alice. It wouldn't surprise me, but I think I'm trying to see. Let me just say it. I think the size of the amount of money that we're having in the budget for the city of Birmingham, the amount of money that we give that they give to the schools, is they should be ashamed of themselves. I've said that if you just think about during the pandemic, we shut libraries down. I mean, I just think I think people are showing us. I know it's hard for us to accept but you have to follow the money. I don't know any other way to say it. If you're not investing in our children, I mean, Terri, I think when you were coming off the board, the city sent money over, but it had to be a stipulation where it was $1 million with mental health. And at one of the board meetings, it was just interesting. We knew from the beginning if we were gonna do mental health, $1 million wouldn't be enough. But I just think we shortchange our children. You watch the different money that you see every council meeting where the city, they just throw money, but in education, we spend more money on recreation than we do investing in things for our children. We invest in individuals' ideas that where we could just be investing in the entire all of our kids' future. They could dictate certain things if they wanted to, or have a conversation, but I just, I don't understand, Alice, these different boards. And I mean, it's been more boards created. And I don't even think like citizens, like when you say these things, they think you have personal issues with people, but these are facts. How can you create a board that determines where money goes in education when you have a locally elected school board that's elected by the citizens and the superintendent, and they're not qualified to tell what they need, or the educators or somebody in this city that's a retired educator or library board. I mean, it just,
Yeah.
I digress. It's
Well-
just, we live in some strange times.
And I'll back you up on that, Richard. That definitely happens, especially with the way here in Birmingham, the city council and the mayor really work outside of Birmingham city school system. And yet they say that, you know, they care about public education, they care about our students and whatever, but they work in isolation. We, you know, especially when I was on the board, when it came to the Birmingham Promise, the board was literally some of the last people to learn about it. We had no input into it. It really had nothing at all to do with the board. And I believe that a majority of us at one time were even speaking out against it because of our concerns and because it wasn't brought to us. What do we have to say about it? We don't know anything about it. But I will say that when it comes to this, Alice, I know that this was a subject not too long ago. So while Richard was speaking, I was Googling. I do remember that it is a board that was actually created back in 1984. And then it kind of disappeared or whatever. And so they have revived it. I can't remember exactly what it's for and I can't find it, but I remember thinking it was relatively innocuous, at least, especially compared to the name of it. But right now, I can't find my notes or any articles on it. But what we'll do is we'll do more research. We'll find out for sure exactly what it is and what it's doing and get that information to all three of you that are kind enough to be on this call with us. And we'll get the information to you.
So what is the bottom line truth about charter schools that people don't want the public to know?
Do you want me to be very honest?
Go right ahead.
When Freedom Prep is coming, they talking to you, I'm gonna just use them as an example. They're not here to provide education. They're coming in as a business, like a business model, and they're here to make money. Most of these people are not going to admit it, but they're here to make money. If you just think about, Keith, just when I was listening to you, I was cringing. Y'all live in the community, and the things that you ask them, and I guarantee we know they didn't flinch. I just think the simplest thing is that you're gonna have also less local community input and power, even though we have some issues, we could say, in Birmingham city schools. We still have input. In those charter schools, Terri just told you of a situation. The community, the parents, you really don't have input. And the way they're structured, there's no structure to where your input would even matter.
So one of the things that they was talking about, and I'm going back to Freedom Prep, one of the things that they talking about was the fact that in Birmingham, you have a lot of, they said, failing schools. And so they're painting a picture like, you know, we know what we're offering, you know, is green. The grass is greener on the other side. The law that, now first of all, who determines what school is failing?
School.
Yeah, who determines that? And does the
White
law
people.
actually, and does that termination actually match, you know, what's going on in our public schools?
Rich.
Because me and Terri talk, okay, Keith, no. First of all, it's from the state legislators. They have their hands in it, and we've already seen, me and Terri Rich, that had reminded her.
Oh yeah, in other words, they just micromanaging. That's all they're doing. Let's just put it out there. They're just micromanaging. Oh,
The party of
experts in
small
everything.
government. Don't forget, the party of small government is in control, and they are the ones that passed that law. And it's very intrusive. And okay, I'm just going to say, go ahead, Richard. Sorry.
No. I think we finna say the same thing. So Keith, the first thing, I'm just gonna say it. Mike Hubbard If y'all Google this, me and Terry went through this today. If you Google what he got in trouble for, what was about a virtual charter school, they were paying him how much, Terry? $7,000
$500 a month, a month.
a month. And at the time, because the legislators are the ones that determine the failing school list, the criteria. So like, if anybody, like, whether people like me and Terry or not, we bring factual information. We may do it a different way from the way you would do it. So the reason, and I've said this to every superintendent, every parent, we have no state criteria right now, today, to determine whether your child is going to a failing school, because the last, 2 years, Terry, we've had COVID. So there's no test. So, but what we do is we get the preliminary numbers throughout the state. And what we know is that they play with numbers, they manipulate them, they try to make them a certain way, and they try to make certain schools not be on there. So we knew, for example, I can say this, and if you in Hoover, I'm just gonna tell it, because your superintendent opened the mouth that last year. Oh yeah, we're gonna be fine on the test. Okay, they took a little test and they found out their scores were worse than Birmingham schools. So the state is not gonna release a failing school list and showing that any Birmingham schools will be doing better than Hoover or other schools. So I also said this year they passed the 3rd grade literacy act. Every time everybody brought it up, they didn't feel like, no, they're gonna keep, as long as, because they're looking at preliminary numbers. They're looking at statewide. They're trying to find a benchmark to make us look bad. So, but we know this in Birmingham. We do know this because we've talked to superintendents and Terry's been on the board. It's certain things we have improved on, but what has happened, some of the other districts during COVID have not performed or improved the way that people are used to them saying, so they're not going to put it out there. So when Freedom Preps paints that picture, they're lying. Tell them to produce the data. They can't produce any data. Then tell them to put their numbers of the schools that they run right now and show you their charter schools that they run that are academically performing. That's the type of things that we say to people. Don't just paint this picture, because it's easy to paint a picture. It's easy to say something, because many people have just said Birmingham City Schools is so bad. And I told Terry today, I'm a product of the system. Keith, you're a product of the system. My kids, product going to the system right now. And the thing that I tell parents to do, especially parents like me, I'm not saying this because I'm the union president. I'm a very opinionated person. Terry, people that know me, if they were not treating the kids good, and I ain't just talking about my kids, the kids that I come across, and my kids don't go to a specialty school. They don't go to Ramsey, they don't go to Phillips, they don't go to WJ Christian. We go to traditional, regular public schools. Our experience has not been what people are talking about. And and it's really outside people that talk about it a lot. And I just wanted to say that. So when they say that, come on now, what qualifies them to say we're failing?
Yeah. And if I can add this real quick, is that it's the same power structure that refuses since the 1901 Constitution to fund our schools equitably. They intentionally put into the Constitution that education in Alabama will be based on property taxes. And so that ensured that there would be, unequal education amongst the children in Alabama. And so it's still that same power structure, not the same people, but the same, power structure and the same ideas towards white supremacy that is in play, that wrote the Accountability Act, that wrote the charter school law. So how all of a sudden are these folks going to be doing something good for our Black and brown students and our high poverty students when they refuse to do the most basic thing, and that's to fund our schools equitably?
And
So
we're
when
talking about the Republican Party, right?
Pardon?
We're talking about
Right.
the Republican Party, right?
No.
The party of
Well, no.
small government. right?
Not necessarily. I mean,
It could be.
technically, Alabama was Democrat for what, 136 years? So yes, now in modern days, we typically attach that to the GOP, but I'm just going to say this, and this may not be popular, but Cory Booker, even President Obama, they were not particularly good for education for Black and brown students. They greatly progressed the charter school and privatization under, especially Obama, under Race to the Top. So I just want to say, that's important for me to say, because when I came to this, I was not a Democrat, I was a Republican. I didn't give any concerns about left or right. So when I speak, it's not from a left angle. I didn't know if I was a Democrat or Republican when I started this. So Democrats don't always get it right. But generally, especially in Alabama, yes, it is the GOP that is out to privatize our schools, that have created the charter school law and the Accountability Act. And so when they're labeling the school failing, it's based on one test. Richard, you know, we talked about it right there when it was happening. The accountability first came out, the Accountability Act, it was based on 3 years. It was based on 3 years of test scores. But what happened? It encompassed too many white students. And so they kept tweaking it and tweaking it until now they have about 96 to 97% of the students in a failing school are Black and brown. And that's because it's based on one test taken one time every school year. And especially when we talk about failing high schools, we need to understand it's only, I always forget, 10th or 11th grade, one of them. It's only one grade taking one test that then puts the entire high school on a failing list if they don't score well. So I really want to encourage people to sit back and think about this. When we use those words, failing school, it's a total fabrication of people that don't value educating Black and brown children. They don't believe in many instances Black and brown children can even perform or succeed at the same level as white students. And
So
I have seen that personally.
It's based
rooted
on,
in nothing factual.
so it's
No.
it's basically just based on, it does not base on, you know, what students are learning academically throughout the year. It's just based on one test.
No, because if you want to know what a student has learned throughout the year, you know what you're going to do? You're going to pull a portfolio of their work. You're going to see what type of work they have done besides how they've done on testing. If you really want to know what a child has learned and where they're at, you are going to measure them in 3, 4, 5 different areas, not just a standardized test. That's just insane. And that's a fallacy that had been sold to the American people over the last, well, shoot. I mean, it kind of started with Reagan if we want to get deep, but we won't go there. But at least since No Child Left Behind.
Yeah. So Terri, Keith, this is also something for people to understand. The other countries, I went overseas a couple of years ago with AFT, and it was an education symposium about education. There was like 20 countries there. And they thought, in the United States, they thought we were crazy because, y'all listen to this, we're the only, what do they call us? I guess you would say wealthy country that all we do is we focus on tests. We focus on tests. We focus on tests. And I want y'all to think about something. Those of you that have, you know, I don't consider myself very old, but I'm a seasoned veteran. Terri just touched on something. I'm finna bring it to a point that's already happened. Before we had these quote unquote failing school list accountability act, we used to have AYP. In Birmingham, if y'all remember, Birmingham, the last year of AYP, you can pull it up. Birmingham schools had improved. Dr. Bice was superintendent of the state. And Homewood Middle School didn't make AYP. They were on the front of the newspaper, and Dr. Bice was trying to explain why Homewood didn't do as well. And the first thing I said, well, why is Dr. Bice doing this? I said, they've never done it for Birmingham City Schools. So what I learned from it, ex Dr. Bice out, is that when they do these tests and labels, I believe that, because remember Terri told you 3 years, and see, COVID has kicked in. So this is an election year. So they don't want to make their own base and people mad. But I predict next legislative session, right before it starts, they're going to start talking about a different way to evaluate whether a school is failing or not failing. And that's what, because they know that COVID has really hurt. But see, our children have not done as bad as they make you believe, because all educational research show, even though we were out with COVID, even though we know that not being in class every day, but if you stimulate a child's brain some kind of way, and by Birmingham City Schools passing out devices, when you look at the learning days of trying to stimulate, whether in person or not in person, a lot of those other schools, they had to shut down schools because COVID got so bad. They missed so many days of not learning, and it affected their kids. Their kids are humans too. And you just watch the stuff that I'm saying. It's not going to be tomorrow, but just watch it. Terri noticed, I said, hey, when we had a big meeting, I said, they will not push the Literacy Act. And everybody, I said it last year. So I've been doing this for a while. Keith, the game that they play is they take something from us. It's time for not just the city of Birmingham, it's not just the school board's job. It's not just Richard's job as union president to fight for our children. I don't know who, somebody, I think it was Alice earlier. And we all, these are our children. This is our future. The city council and mayor should be investing in our children. And they have so many other mechanisms what they could be partnering and working together with, of what I envision. It's so many things that we used to have that we don't have anymore. We don't have true community schools anymore. That funding came from the city of Birmingham, not Birmingham City Schools. What you have is people start feeling like it wasn't working. Well, we the consumers that went through that, and the parents, I never heard anybody in the community say it wasn't working. But then I do believe that at some point they're going to bring some reform person in, and they're going to throw that in there as a component of something with their school, because that's what goes on with these reforms. But Keith, we could go on and on. I want to thank you personally, because you have a lot going on within your family, praying for your dad. Just taking time out today, letting us talk a little bit, and Alice, and who was it, Jake? Thank you. I mean, thank you for the questions.
Yeah, we have another question here from Alice. Do you all think the success of the ACAP scores will create a sort of impediment or void for charter schools to gain leverage or popularity?
Richard, can I give a little bit of background on this real quick, and then you can answer it? Okay,
yes,
I think one thing that's important to know is that when Race to the Top happened, and that's when it, really became mandatory for states, because Common Core and all that kind of stuff, then a lot of the states jumped onto, there was basically 2 tests you could use. SBAC and I forget the other one, better something. But at any rate, Alabama, of course, always doing its own thing, it decided it would work with Pearson to have its own state test. So there were a cohort of 2, maybe 3 states that worked along with Pearson to create a test aligned to Common Core to fulfill the requirements of Race to the Top, which took the place of No Child Left Behind. Anyway, I'm saying all that to say this. A lot of money was spent, a lot of money, if I'm not incorrect, I think it's in the billions, was spent to transfer everything over to this new test that Alabama worked directly with Pearson on, to start giving this test. And then after a few years, all of a sudden, what happened, Richard? Ooh, Oops, it's not aligned. What? What? How can it not be aligned? So then we switched to something else. And now I believe, Richard, are we on our third test now with the ACAP? Okay.
Yeah, we're on our third test.
So basically, this is just a bunch of made up baloney. It's just people making money. Total billions across this nation is being made on testing. But even here in Alabama alone, because of the route we took, it's been a total waste of time. Our schools are being graded, like we've talked about, on these tests. That 1 minute is the bee's knees and the next minute's not aligned, and how dare they? And the state school board votes in another one. Who in the world really knows what any of it means? All we do know is that it's all going to be manipulated to be in favor of the charter schools, except for, like Richard just mentioned, they haven't done as well as people were expecting. And so things have, like the third grade literacy test, they have voted that the third graders that do not meet the proficiency level will not be held back, because they realize probably this encompassed many white children too. So the ACAP will be used to help the charter schools as long as the data helps the charter schools. But so far, when you look at the ACAP data that has come out, well, it's not ACAP, whatever test it was, they recently put out some numbers, okay? Let's just say it that way. And you can see LEAP, isn't that the name of it, in Montgomery?
Yeah, yep, in Montgomery.
Three. You can see LEAD, you can see all the charter schools, but in particular, those three, there were several areas where those schools did not do as well as Birmingham City Schools did. So right now,
Terri, can you say that again?
there are several areas where they did not do as well as Birmingham City Schools. Now, let's be honest about it. Birmingham City Schools hasn't done great, okay? But again, we have to look at all of these manipulations and games that are being played in the smoke and mirrors. And really, do we want our children's success boiled down to one test? What does it really tell us about the children in Birmingham City Schools? I have said all along to every superintendent that I served over, and yes, the board is the boss of the superintendents, Dr. Herring, Dr. Sullivan, both. I told them that by bowing down and giving into that standardized test, we are giving the white power structure, the power structure, whatever you want to call them, control over Birmingham City Schools. That if we worried about that portfolio that really showed us what our children are doing and truly taught our children, that the people would come. The success of the schools could not be denied no matter what that standardized test said. And no superintendent so far has been willing to step out there and turn their nose up to that power structure and say, you know what, we don't care, we're teaching our children regardless. And that's what needs to happen in Birmingham. And believe me, charter schools are not going to be the ones to do that.
So can we say, or allegedly, that you have, you know, some people in Birmingham City Schools that are involved in this charter school fiasco?
You want that, Richard?
Oh yes, yeah. We let me say this, and it's you can prove that it happens. It's because you know you got to understand it's a system. It's a school system, a business, and you have employees. I can remember when Dr. Bice, even when they opened these different schools, you could tell who moved and things they promised people. We've seen people say they're partners. That's the other thing that the community needs to watch and listen to language. Partners. You know, when you hear partners, look who the partners are. You know, I've even said that when Terri was on the school board. Who are your true partners? If you're giving them money and you're giving them all access and they find your weakness and use it against you. We know our weaknesses within the school system. One of the things I like to tell people, keep before we get off, so people can know, and I can prove that our schools, and I'm talking about traditional schools. The only thing I get upset with Birmingham City Schools about is that for some reason, we start promoting the Ramseys, the Phillips, and we make our community feel that the other schools If your child goes there, they're not learning anything, they're less than. But the thing I always use is sports. And if you look at sports, Jackson Olin, I'll take Jackson Olin and Parker. The past couple of years, their football teams have been good. There has not been one student on those football teams that couldn't qualify to go to a college. And they had offers. And those kids went on to different colleges. And the reason I always say that's about barometer, that at the end of the day, whatever school you're going to, if you want your child to go to college or whatever, if you think about it, that's the academic performance. Well, colleges don't just let you in if you don't know how to read and you don't know how to do math. This is the language that they use and try to describe. And that's what Terri talks about with this one test, and try to make it like our kids are not learning. And it's not a couple of kids that I'm talking about. If you know about sports, Jackson Olin, Parker, if you watch this year, they already have kids that are going into one kid's going to his sophomore year, junior at Jackson Olin, that I just off the top of my head at Parker. I've seen 2 kids visiting colleges, getting the offers. And then I've just asked to go up there to be sure they have 3.5, 3.6. They've already made 22s, 24s, 26 on the ACT. But we're going to let people paint this narrative. And I'll make it even simpler for them, Keith. If you're Alabama and you're an Auburn fan, and you've been watching these games, you know what I'm talking about. Where did Quentin Williams come from? We know him. Him and his brother Quincy. But we say there's a failing school. We've had at Jackson Olin, TJ Moultrie just graduated from Auburn, from Jackson Olin. Quindarius Robinson is at Alabama, I think, right now playing linebacker. I could keep going. At Troy basketball right now, I forgot the kid's name when Parker was going to the state championship those 2 years. He's playing for Troy now. This is just off the top of my head, not me think, oh, how did I forget Retta? Retta's at the University of Alabama freshman, broke every record at Parker, never lost a race. Had to qualify to go. I mean, come on, y'all. I'm gonna break it down to who you're fans of, who you support your team. Look who's playing. But you're gonna let somebody come in and say, hey, they're not performing. And they paint this narrative. Do we want to do better? Do the system we want to do better? Yeah. Am I sitting here saying everything is perfect? No. But I'm sitting here to paint this picture that our kids are not learning anything. And if your kids don't go to Ramsey or Phillips, they're getting a shady education. That's a lie. And in some situations, I truly believe in, and I think I proved if Dodge and Hendricks was on here with us, I've proven that in a lot of situations, I believe, and I say this not just because I went there, but I've had 4 kids go there, and Terri, daughter, teaches there, and Terri hit a story. Parker, when it comes to high schools right now, they're not a failing school. They are producing some of the most amount of scholarship money right now, and I'm talking about a school that sits directly across the street from a housing project right now. Yep. So, and I'm not saying this because I went there. These are factual things. So we're letting people paint a narrative for their benefit, where they make money.
We got about 20 minutes, and we got 20 minutes before we close out. The subject.
Lord, 20 more minutes. Oh my God, you just made me excited. Okay.
The subject of privatization has come up again. This is what Alice Speaks says. Mayor Whiffen spoke about closing libraries the same way he knows schools have had to close. The language is similar for both institutions. And if they can outsource or operate independently using a mayor's office or operation or pilot program like that, that education board that she brought up, for example, that looks nice, but don't have a systematic support. We will see more emphasis on privatization, even with libraries. So does anybody want to expound on that?
If I can, Richard, is that?
Okay.
Okay, so, you know, someone in the city kind of leaked to me about what was going on in the finance department, about how they've already privatized a large part of the finance department, and that is the business tax side of it. When I started doing that research, I found out that the executive director of the company that now runs the business tax side of Birmingham City's financial department, that he was also the same person that in the past was head of a board. The only company in the country, if I remember correctly, that privatizes libraries. And so, you know, basically, Rupert Murdoch years ago, 20, 30 years ago, sat down, you know, these investors, they go over to Switzerland or wherever and have their conferences. Okay, what are we all going to attack next? And what he told them was education was what you want to privatize because it's a $500 billion market. Well, now it's more like a $600 billion market. But at any rate, my point in that is that these folks are understanding now that privatizing public goods are the way to go. Education was a big part of it. And now all of the different parts of a city's budget is now up for grabs as well. So it's all part of the same animal. They're all the same conversations. You know, now we had the subject of, you know, the selling of the parking garages, and there's been multiple, and the maintenance stuff, you know, right? We're talking about privatizing
Bridget, you know
traffic.
exactly, I see you over there. you know,
Yeah, I mean, all the language is the same, and it's all for the same reason. It's all for the same reason. It's to monetize, right?
Of course.
And especially though when it comes to education, because that's what Richard and I do, it's particularly heinous in education because it's not garbage that's not going to get picked up. It's children that aren't going to be educated. It's not a public library that's going to get shut down, which is hurtful and harmful to an entire community. I'm not minimizing that impact, but it's not a child's life that is going to end up graduating and not know how to read or do math. As they sabotage our public libraries, they have already been sabotaging Birmingham City Schools for years. And that's something that we cannot forget. This isn't just something they come in and do. They, like we talked when we first opened this, have plans in place for these things to happen. They starve our public libraries. How long did it take to get that new, well, not even an escalator, stairs now, they downgraded. How long did that take? They have been starving public libraries in Birmingham. They have been starving so many things. And we cannot overlook our school system. People are so quick to say, oh, the board doesn't know what they're doing. Oh, the superintendent's this, the educators are that. They will point to everything except for the people that are in charge of the power and the money and pull the strings behind those elected officials. We're not blaming those people. Birmingham City Schools can educate its children if they were free to do so.
And let's not forget the budget fiasco that Birmingham experienced for the last couple of years, you know, in terms of libraries and education. Now, the city was only giving Birmingham City Schools $3 million. $3 million, that's not even 1% of your budget. But if you go to places like Huntsville, they give way more money to their school system. Their libraries are, you know, as well. What city in America have you heard of that actually took money away from public schools or the libraries? Because if you look at Montgomery, when we went through the pandemic, what happened in Montgomery? They didn't take any money away from the libraries. They didn't take any money away from public education. Well, what they did is
Birmingham was the only one doing that.
Birmingham, right? Birmingham was the only city. Birmingham was the only city, you know, that have done that. Why?
And
Why did they do that?
I just want to make this point as well. Under my tenure on the board, my time on the board, we increased our reserve, the law states you have to have 1 month reserve. They say we had 9 or 10. Even if we had 5 or 6, I'm just saying we increased the reserve. And so for our city councilors and our mayor to say that they don't trust Birmingham City Schools with that money, or they didn't know where it was going, that all is false. I'm not going to say they're lying because I don't know what was in their head, but all I know is that we sent them the inventory or whatever, the invoice that they wanted, and they knew darn well where that money was going. They created a false narrative around it. And so they did that to justify not giving our children any funding.
Something about they was using money for security.
Yes, and that is true. Some of it was going towards that, and that was a long time understanding.
Well, wait a minute, but let me say this, y'all. Let me say this. Let me be fair. And Lonnie Malone said this, and I have to give him his credit. When that came out, Wardine Alexander was president of the school board, and Randall Woodford was president of the school board. When they were sitting there saying that stuff at any point in time, when they were on the school board and they were board presidents, they could have changed all that language. They know what the money goes for. It's been going that way for years. It didn't just start. They're gaslighting. If you're not putting your money where your mouth is for children, if we can stand up and say this was the largest budget we ever had in the city, but we've spent the least amount of money when it comes to our children. I mean, you look at what we cut in our budgets. Look at even this year. We wonder why you're not going to a track. Now, this is what the games they play. You're not going, they'll say, hey, schools are failing. No, schools in Birmingham are doing the best that they can do with minimal funding from the city, sometimes zero. Can you imagine the Arlington House, if they put it at 0 and for a whole year it sat there, and then they call a council meeting and somebody say, hey, the roof on the Arlington House or something is wrong. Did it take a rocket scientist to know that you gave 0? You gave 0. But you're comparing yourself to other cities. Nobody, I don't understand why, and I want y'all to hear me. It is certain things that we have to do in a civilized society. It's certain things we have to have. If you don't fund it, you have chaos. And that's what we've been doing. We just gave $1 million. They gave $1 million. I don't even think, Terri, the school system figured out I know they need more money. Is the city gonna give more than $1 million for mental health? Because it was their idea. They can't lie this time. But no, they can't lie this time and say it's going to security, it's going to that. They can't lie. That's what they wanted. That's what they voted on.
Yeah, well, we'll have to wait and see when the budget, I think for fiscal year 2023, comes around. I'm quite sure that is going to be part of the conversation when the city council start talking to the budget again. But the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I want people to be reminded of what this city has done to public education and our libraries, because I think we forgot. And I want people to remind, this is what your mayor and city council has done to public education and our libraries. And we're still having that conversation, even as I speak, on those two subjects, because keep in mind, they're still talking about closing 4 libraries, despite the fact that, they're saying, no, your library is not going to close. Why should I believe anything they said? You know how many lies they told? And
But I thought it was because of COVID.
Yeah, they're blaming everything on COVID. But here's the thing. Even though we've been through a pandemic, you still got a government to run. You still have obligations and priorities. And one of your priorities should be that your child has an adequate quality education, that your community, should have access to not only literary resources at your local library, but your library should be more than a place than just books. When I had an interview with education committee be considered on the library board, that's one of the things I brought up, because one of the things they was talking about is that how can the library do fundraisers to support the library system. And I was like, what city in America?
What?
Yes, that's what they told me. And I was like, what city in America? Let me say this again. What city in America do you have a mayor and a city council that talk like that do not want to invest funds to keep your libraries open or to fund public education? I have not run across one city that does it. And the whole time that they was talking to they was talking to me, they was talking about, well, what ways can the libraries raise funds? And they was talking about libraries as being a place to where they're just books. And you know what I told them? I said, y'all need to get out of that mentality that libraries are all about books. It's more than that. And I was like, how many of y'all actually been to your local library? I'm not talking about just once in a blue moon. I'm talking about constant. You're looking at a guy that I go to my local library just almost every day. So I know exactly what's going on there. And at Titusville Library, and I'm just gonna put this out there, the library director, Ms. Reba Williams, is doing a damn good job in keeping the community engaged,
Yeah.
and keeping children active. We're not just talking about the literacy part. We're just talking about bringing resources and bringing programs to keep and activities to keep people, especially our young people, off the street. Okay, because a lot of parents are
Alice,
saying, what are we doing to keep our kids engaged?
Keith, Alice wanted to say something about libraries while we were on that subject. I saw that.
Oh yeah, okay. Well, let's put her on here.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo the what y'all was saying about like your interview, for example. I heard that from other people they interviewed, that their questions were basically just how much money you think you can fundraise for the libraries. How are you going to get money for them? Which is a part of the board's responsibility. It's a lot of it, but that fundraising that they're talking about, a lot of it comes from the form of grants that come directly from the library associations of the country or the state. Sometimes people can apply for things, with the infrastructure bill. I believe there's some things they're able to get they weren't able to before, and they can like reapply. But really, those interviews were private. But if people want to get a sense of where the council is on how they feel about libraries, there's that meeting that happened December 20th. And this is a video that you can find on the Birmingham City Council page. It's the Education Committee. And you can see how they talk to the board while the board's making a presentation about what optimal funding and staffing they need and what they've been going through, and how they don't want to shut down libraries. And they've heard got a lot of feedback about that. You can watch the video, and part of the videos have been put up on the Save Birmingham Public Libraries page, just a snippet of it, where they're being asked questions about how they can get their different revenue streams come from the library, as in, what can you charge people? One of them asked about charging for research, which is one of the great services that the Central Library provides. It has there are archivists there that are ready and willing to provide their services for free to anybody that comes in. And we have a counselor who was asking them, well, why don't you charge for that? Where can you get revenue? That should be extremely alarming for for anyone, if you think that they're not going to lean towards privatization, which privatization essentially is not just about does a company take over, it's you're no longer have equal services available to everybody. Like you're shutting people out just when they walk in the door.
Can
So
I
if
ask
y'all
a
want to know how
question?
the city thinks of that, watch that video, their meeting December 20th, 2021. And that's how they were talking about it.
Does the public library system here in Birmingham have a grant writer on staff? Anybody know?
Sorry. Yeah, so a lot of their board are made up of people that have good successes in grant writing and procuring grant writing. In fact, Vincent, hold on, I don't know.
Hi, Vincent.
Sorry. I think the cat escaped outside and Vincent's worried about her. Okay. Anyway, but yeah, they do have grant writers. And
But I mean,
they
did they hire one that they pay to do just that?
Oh, I don't believe so, but it's not, they have committees that are not, that I don't really know about. They have, opportunities for grants that I believe, Kim Richardson is a board member, and I know that through her, at least through the board in general, they've required grants. And they're not, it's not that simple. It's not as simple as a city budget. I mean, we can't really say anything simple, but it's, I mean, as far as hiring grant writers, I don't know. At some point, the mayor explicitly stated they had hired someone to assess their library system in regards to closures, but the board themselves, they stated that they had no idea who that person was the mayor's referring to. So it's kind of not clear, but yeah, they have the opportunity for procuring grants.
So my daughter-in-law, the reason I ask is because my daughter-in-law for some time up in Huntsville worked with Huntsville Public Library on just that, on writing grants for them. So.
Who just passed us in population? Oh, let me be quiet. That's a whole nother story.
Sorry. I do want to say that with grants, no matter how many grants they get, that doesn't make up for what the city has cut them by. The city is on the hook for paying their payroll budget and the materials budget, which they slashed. And with the surplus that they were talking about, I don't see why they can't bring at least just $3 million back to the libraries, where they could be funded back from 13 million to 17 million, which is about where they were hovering at for a while.
True.
So grants wouldn't make up for that. The city is responsible for their payroll and for that materials budget.
Yeah, excellent point.
Yeah.
Not to mention,
Well, Alex,
the city has $80 million that they put out. If you saw the news report on WBRC Fox 6 on April the 4th, they got $80 million, floating around too. Not to mention that, I discovered that they now have a budget surplus. So, ladies and gentlemen, what is the problem? What's the problem? Can somebody make that make sense to me? What's the problem? We got all this money floating around here. What is the problem?
I guess we'll have to get those elected officials on, and they'll have to answer the question, because I do see the word surplus. And when I started looking at the services that are provided to our community, we see lack thereof, when it comes to funding. I was even thinking about park and rec, even with, I used to work with the swimming pools. I think we have 17 pools, and I want to see if they're going to be open this year. And they can't say it costs them money because they got a federal grant for that. They've always had a federal grant. Just the upkeep of the facilities, the city sends the money to the park and rec board. And see, I want people to understand. I understand by me working at that time, the game that these politicians play, and politicians, you got to understand, you can lie to the rest of the community and say, oh, it's that board. But the city council and the mayor ultimately determines the budgets for the things that we're talking about tonight. The school board has a separate budget, but when the city sends money, you all, as elected body, they're the ones, no matter what they say, no matter how nice, if the library board tell you they don't have money, that's because the city didn't give them the money. If Park and Rec tell you they don't have money to do something, it's because the city didn't give the money. And I think the Park and Rec, let me say this before we get off. We talk about privatizing. Even though that stadium is sitting over there that everybody's talking about because it's new, it's really been privatized because Legion Field, we owned it. We don't own this new stadium. So all those things that's going over there, the Jefferson County Authority, they will determine, if they want to give us more money, but it could have been all our money if we, did what we need to do at Legion Field. I'm not saying we don't have to have that facility over there, but I find it quite interesting that everything is going to that new facility, and Birmingham doesn't, we don't gain from it 100%, whereas we own Legion Field. And anybody that owns anything, you get what I'm saying. So I'm making it simple as I can, so and it affects our budget, because we want the revenue. That means we could be making even more money on certain things. But I just think it's by design. And if I'm wrong, do something different, city elected officials. Fund the libraries, fund the school system, fund the Park and Rec. If it's not COVID, what's going to be an excuse this year? We don't want to hear your philosophy about what you think it should look like. What we want you to do is do your job by funding these things that affect senior citizens and the citizens and our kids. And that's my 2 cents. That's as nice as I can say it.
And so
Okay,
here's
we're
going to
have closing. Yeah, we're gonna have. Go ahead and say what you are gonna say, Terri. Then we'll have some closing remarks.
Yes.
From the two of you.
Thank you. So this goes along exactly with what Richard was saying, and this would be my closing comment from an article I shared the link with y'all in the chat from 2015 from WHNT. I'm just going to read the first couple sentences of it. This was about charter schools, but listen to what this says. I think it's going to sum up everything that we're talking about. It says when a legislative body starts to make dramatic policy changes, follow the money. And this was said by the political analyst Jess Brown with WHNT. Says also the questions about the charter school legislation working its way through Alabama are easy. Brown says you're just looking for who wins and who loses. So follow the money and look at who's winning and who's losing. And I think in Birmingham, and when it comes to the charter schools, I think it's pretty obvious who's winning and who's losing.
Richard.
And Keith, I want to thank you because you have a serious family matter. We praying for your dad. We thank you. I can't thank you enough because you're taking time away, and you can be commended what you do in the community. Alice, thank you for your input. But I want people to leave them with this thought. You may disagree with what we're saying, but we have the right because we're citizens to say what we're saying. But what you can't do is put the blame on us. We're not the elected officials. We know we have issues. We just ask that they come together. It's roles that they have to play. It's not their job to dictate to us. It's our job to say what we expect of them. And that is the big challenge that we see, not just locally, but nationally. When it comes to charter schools, we need to tell them we're not gonna let you come here and use our kids as guinea pigs. What we're gonna do, we're gonna work together as a community, as a city, and begin to invest and have. I've often said we need an education summit on where we are today and where we want to go for the future. And that's just my thought pattern that I think we need to do.
Alice, would you like to say give some closing remarks?
Sure. Well, I'll talk about, I'm a parent of a child in the Birmingham City Schools, and he's been in the school system since he was in pre-K. And it feels like, we're just trying to stay above water all the time, especially with managing an IEP and making sure he's got good representation at the school. I am very concerned that if charter schools really, try to fight harder than they are, people sleep on it, that something like that could just they'd be more vulnerable to attacks of the system. And I feel for parents that don't, know what's going to happen. And that's why I really appreciate people getting ahead of us and telling us like this is still a threat. This is a thing. Some people think that, because it's Birmingham, that charter schools will never happen. But clearly that's you can't sleep on it. Like Terri said, they've got years of patience and building to get to the point where they can, take more. So I don't want to bash the school system. That's not what I'm trying to do, but I can also see that like there's a vulnerability that is easy to exploit, and I really want to see more leaders, fight against that.
Thank you for your comments, Alice. And last but not least, Jake, if there's anything you would like to say in closing.
Let's see, let me turn my camera on. Just thank you so much. And I really, really appreciate it. If y'all do something like this again, I hope that there's more attendance, and feel free to reach out, or yeah, anything I can do long-term to support, I'll do. So thank you so much to Richard and Terri.
So yeah, so we will have another segment, on this, as well. And definitely look on Facebook page. It's Austerlid Broadcast Section Facebook page for more information about the different podcasts that we have. And we're going to have another segment on this. It's been 2 hours, but a lot of information has been said. And so thank you, Richard and Terri and Alice and Jake, for coming on here and providing us some great information. I'm just overwhelmed of to host this podcast, and hopefully that when this broadcast goes, more people will be able to listen to it, and they will get the facts about what is actually going on in public education and privatization. So thank you guys for being on here. Really appreciate it. And that would do it for this edition of Talk Show Presents. Due to the popularity of this subject, next month, after the Mother's Day holiday or whatever the next date would be for this particular podcast, we will invite Richard and Terri and Alice back again to do a part 2, because I think there needs to be a part 2 because there's a whole lot more that we can discuss about public education. But in this particular part 2, we not only want to highlight some of the concerns and the problems, but we also going to talk about some possible solutions. So that would be on the next Talk Show Presents. Stay tuned to the Austerlid Broadcast Section Facebook page for more information on that, and dates and times and things of that nature. So we're going to say goodnight. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Good evening.
And thank you.